In the 1960s, one company ran a taxi service. It sold instant rice. It made toy vacuum cleaners. It made ballpoint pens. It even ran a chain of hotels that rented rooms by the hour. Every single one of these businesses failed. Some failed quietly. One failed so badly, the company got sued by Lego. Today, that same company has sold over 850 million game consoles. Its mascot is more recognizable to kids than most world leaders. And the whole empire almost didn't happen. For nearly 80 years, this company had no idea what it was supposed to be. This is the story of Nintendo and the strange, meandering, occasionally humiliating road that led a company that started out making playing cards in the 1800s to become the most successful entertainment company on Earth. In 1889, in Kyoto, Japan, a craftsman named Fusajiro Yamauchi started a small company to produce hanafuda by hand. Traditional Japanese playing cards made from mulberry bark, each deck built around 12 suits representing the months of the year. It was a niche, respectable little business. For decades, that's all Nintendo was. A card company, passed down through the family, quietly profitable, entirely unremarkable. In 1929, Fusajiro retired, and the company passed to his son-in-law, Sekiryo Kaneda, who had married into the family and taken the Yamauchi name to inherit the business. Kaneda ran the card company for 20 years, right up until 1949, when he suffered a stroke and had no other successor ready. So, he called his grandson. Hiroshi Yamauchi was studying law at Waseda University when the summons came. He left school without finishing his degree and took over Nintendo at just 22 years old, on one condition he insisted on himself. He would be the only family member allowed to work at the company. His own older cousin was fired to make that happen. Nobody took him seriously at first. He was young. He had zero business experience. When factory workers went on strike almost immediately, testing him, Yamauchi responded by firing the longtime employees who had questioned his authority. The message was clear. He was not going to be managed by the people who thought he was a placeholder. Yamauchi was ambitious in a way the company had never seen. In 1959, he struck a licensing deal with Disney, Mickey Mouse, on Nintendo's playing cards. It sold 600,000 units in a single year. Nintendo's profits tripled, and the company joined the Osaka and Kyoto stock exchanges. Yamauchi became the dominant force in Japan's card industry. You'd think that success would be enough. It wasn't, for a specific reason. In 1956, 3 years before the Disney deal even closed, Yamauchi had traveled to the United States and visited the headquarters of the United States Playing Card Company, at the time the largest playing card manufacturer on Earth. He found their offices small, unimpressive, unambitious. It convinced him of something uncomfortable. Even total dominance in playing cards was still a ceiling on a tiny market. If Nintendo stayed a card company, its best possible outcome was still smallness. So Yamauchi decided Nintendo needed to become something else entirely. He just had no idea what. What followed through the 1960s is one of the strangest stretches in corporate history. A company with real cash and real ambition throwing it at almost anything, hoping something would stick. First, taxis. In 1963, Nintendo launched a cab service in Kyoto called Daya, betting transportation could give the steady, recurring revenue playing cards never could. For a while, it actually worked. Daya turned a real profit. Then labor union disputes drove up driver costs and crushed the margins, and Nintendo quietly walked away. Then, food. Yamauchi noticed how popular instant noodles had become across Japan, and figured the same convenience idea would work with rice. Nintendo launched individually packaged, dehydrated instant rice bowls, sold under its own name in grocery stores. It had no credibility in food, no distribution muscle, and the product simply did not sell. It became one of the company's most embarrassing losses of the decade. Here's the strange twist most retellings leave out. Around the same time, Nintendo also launched a joint venture called San-O, selling rice seasoning packets decorated with Disney characters. That one actually worked. So the failure wasn't rice itself. It was Nintendo trying to sell plain, unbranded instant rice on a company name that meant nothing to anyone buying groceries. Then came the toys. Baby swings, novelty vacuum cleaners, ballpoint pens, and, almost too fitting to believe, a set of plastic interlocking building blocks called the N and B blocks. A real toy company noticed the suspiciously familiar design and sued for infringement. That company was Lego. Nintendo survived the lawsuit. The blocks were different enough in shape and size to avoid liability. But decades later, it is still one of the strangest collisions in toy industry history. A Japanese card company sued by a Danish toy giant over plastic bricks. And then, most infamously, love hotels. Nintendo opened a chain of short-stay hotels, renting rooms by the hour, catering discreetly to couples across Japan's major cities. By some accounts, Yamauchi himself was one of the venture's most frequent customers, despite being a married man. It is the one business Nintendo has spent the most effort trying to make people forget, and the company has never eagerly detailed exactly where these hotels operated or how long they ran. By the late 1960s, Nintendo was financially stable, mostly on the strength of its aging card business. But strategically, it was completely lost. A company willing to try taxis, rice, and hourly hotels in the same 5-year stretch is not a company with a plan. It is a company running out of ideas and running out of time to find one. The idea that finally worked came from the most unlikely place possible: a bored maintenance worker killing time on a factory floor. In 1965, Nintendo hired a young electronics graduate named Gunpei Yokoi. He had studied at Doshisha University, but his grades were unremarkable, and unlike his classmates, who landed jobs at prestigious firms in Tokyo, Yokoi couldn't secure a single decent interview. He later said he never had a specific dream for his work. He just wanted to stay in Kyoto. Nintendo's maintenance job, keeping the hanafuda card printing machines running, was simply what he could get. For the next year, Yokoi did his job and, in his spare time, built small mechanical toys purely to amuse himself. One of them was a scissor mechanism arm, made from crisscrossed plastic segments that could extend outward and grab a distant object with a small claw at the end. It was a personal project, nothing more. In 1966, Hiroshi Yamauchi was touring the factory floor when he noticed it sitting on Yokoi's workbench. It was a janitor's idle hobby project. Yamauchi looked at it and saw something else entirely. He pulled Yokoi off the maintenance line on the spot and ordered him to turn the toy into an actual, sellable product before the holiday season. The result? Marketed as the Ultra Hand and packaged with 3 colored balls to catch, sold over 1.2 million units within its first few years on shelves. A maintenance technician's boredom had just outsold nearly every deliberate business venture Nintendo had attempted in the previous decade, combined. Yamauchi didn't waste the lesson. He created an entirely new toy and game division, Nintendo's first, and put Yokoi in charge of it. Yokoi kept producing hits. The Love Tester, a device that measured a couple's chemistry by having them hold hands and complete an electrical circuit, sold well enough that Yokoi joked he got to hold hands with plenty of girls thanks to it. The Ultra Machine, an automatic pitching toy, sold over 1 million units on its own. And eventually, the Game & Watch, a line of simple handheld electronic games, inspired, Yokoi said, by watching a bored businessman on a bullet train fidget with a pocket calculator to pass the time. Yokoi eventually put a name to the philosophy behind all of it: lateral thinking with withered technology. His argument was almost a direct rebuke of how most companies think about innovation. Cutting-edge technology, he believed, was not actually an advantage for a toy designer. It was a distraction, forcing engineers to spend their time learning unfamiliar new components instead of focusing on what actually made something fun to use. Instead, Yokoi deliberately built products around technology that was already cheap, mature, and fully understood, and then found a genuinely novel way to use it. Not the newest chip, the cheapest, reliable one, used in a way nobody had tried yet. That single philosophy, developed by a man hired to fix card printing machines, would go on to define nearly every major Nintendo product for the next 3 decades. Through the 1970s, Nintendo's toy and game division kept growing under Yokoi's unconventional instincts, and the company began experimenting further into electronics, including early color TV game home consoles built with outside manufacturing partners, simple machines that plugged directly into a television. Then, in 1980, Nintendo made its first serious push into the American arcade market with a game called Radar Scope, a Space Invaders-style shooter. It sold reasonably well in Japan. In the United States, it flopped so badly that Nintendo of America was left sitting on a warehouse of 2,000 unsold cabinets and a mountain of unpaid debt. Minoru Arakawa, the young president of Nintendo of America and Yamauchi's own son-in-law, pleaded with his father-in-law back in Kyoto for a way to save the investment. Yamauchi's answer was a conversion kit, a way to gut the unsold Radar Scope cabinets and fill them with a completely new game without having to manufacture a single new machine. He pulled his entire talent pool for ideas. Most of Nintendo's experienced designers were busy. The job went, almost by default, to a young staff artist named Shigeru Miyamoto, who had never designed a game in his life. Miyamoto originally wanted to build a story around Popeye, Bluto, and Olive Oil, but Nintendo couldn't secure the license in time, so he improvised. Bluto became a giant ape. Popeye became a carpenter, originally called Jumpman. Olive Oil became a woman named Pauline, in need of rescue. That game was Donkey Kong, supervised technically by Gunpei Yokoi himself, and Jumpman would later be renamed Mario. The 2,000 converted cabinets sold out almost immediately. By October of 1981, Nintendo was moving 4,000 units a month. By the summer of 1982, Donkey Kong had generated more than $180 million in revenue. By 1983, that number had climbed past $280 million. A game built entirely to salvage a warehouse of failed hardware had just become one of the most profitable arcade machines ever made, and it introduced the world to the character who would define the company for the next 40 years. 2 years later, Nintendo released the family computer, the Famicom, in Japan, later launched internationally as the Nintendo Entertainment System. The timing could not have been more strange. The American video game industry had just suffered a near total collapse in 1983, so severe that the market cratered from over $3 billion to roughly $100 million almost overnight. Retailers refused to stock game consoles of any kind. Atari had become a punchline. Nintendo's American division had to disguise what it was even selling. They dropped the word game entirely, branding the console an entertainment system instead. They redesigned the hardware with a front-loading cartridge slot, styled to look like a VCR rather than a game machine. They bundled it with a toy robot called Rob and a plastic light gun called the Zapper, specifically so retail buyers would shelve it in the toy aisle instead of the dead video game aisle. Nintendo even offered stores a 90-day return policy on unsold units, absorbing the risk itself just to get shelf space at all. It launched in test markets in New York City in October of 1985. It worked. The NES did not just succeed, it single-handedly revived an industry that corporate America had already written off as finished. Alongside the hardware, Nintendo introduced a strict licensing system, a lockout chip that blocked unauthorized cartridges, and a seal of quality that limited outside publishers to a handful of games a year. It was the exact opposite of the chaotic, quality-free flood of Atari games that had caused the crash in the first place. Mario, The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, franchises now worth billions of dollars, more than 4 decades later. Gunpei Yokoi, the man once hired to fix card printing equipment, went on to design the Game Boy in 1989. using a sharp processor derived from mid-1970s technology and a cheap, low-resolution monochrome screen, exactly according to his own withered technology philosophy. At a time when competitors like the Atari Lynx and Sega Game Gear were racing toward full-color screens and shorter battery life, the Game Boy's simplicity meant it ran for hours on 4 AA batteries anyone could buy at a gas station. It outsold every technically superior competitor combined, over 118 million units, making it for a time the best-selling game console in history. Here's what's strange about laying Nintendo's history end to end. None of its 1960s failures, the taxis, the rice, the hotels, the lawsuit over toy blocks, look, in hindsight, like the actions of a company about to become one of the most successful entertainment brands on the planet. If you'd been a Japanese investor in 1968, watching Nintendo lose money on instant rice while running short-stay hotels, you would have had every reason to write the company off as an unfocused, directionless business clinging to a shrinking playing card market. So here's the real question worth sitting with. What's the difference between a company like Nintendo, whose decade of genuine failure eventually led to a global empire, and a company that just fails and stays failed? It's not that the failures were secretly good ideas in disguise. The taxi business really did fail. The rice really didn't sell. The love hotels really were an embarrassment the company still won't fully discuss. Every one of those ventures was a genuine, unrecovered loss. The difference was what the company did with the cash and the runway those failures hadn't yet burned through. It kept trying new things fast. It cut each failed venture loose without hesitation once the evidence was in. And critically, it left enough organizational room for something as small and unplanned as a maintenance worker's hobby project to actually get noticed by the one person with the power to act on it. Most companies, watching an employee waste company time building a toy claw on the factory floor, would have told him to get back to work. Nintendo's president saw it and restructured the entire company around it within a year. The companies that survive a decade of genuine failure are not the ones that were secretly right all along. They are the ones that stayed cheap and fast enough to keep taking new swings, and stayed humble enough to notice when the answer showed up somewhere nobody had planned for it to. Nintendo didn't have a strategy in the 1960s. It had a series of expensive, embarrassing guesses, and a young leader arrogant enough to keep guessing even after taxis, rice, and hotels had all failed in a row. What saved the company wasn't a brilliant 5-year plan. It was a maintenance technician who built a toy on his own time, and a president willing to stop everything the moment he saw it. The uncomfortable version of this lesson is that most companies that fail this many times in a row don't get a Gunpei Yokoi moment. They just run out of runway and disappear, and nobody makes a documentary about them. The more useful version is this. If you're going to keep making expensive guesses, the actual skill isn't guessing right the first time. It's cutting the losers fast enough and staying humble enough that you're still solvent and still paying attention when the real answer walks in from a direction you never once considered. Nintendo spent 80 years and one card business, one taxi company, one rice brand, and one chain of hotels finding that out. Most companies don't get 80 years to be wrong. If you want to see another company that took years of embarrassing failures to find the one idea that actually worked, let me know in the comments. That might be the next one we cover.